All right, I think that we are going to get up and running here. I know that we'll have some more people joining here in a little bit. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Nick Cicero, the Vice President of Strategy here at Conviva, and I am excited to be sharing with you today really the culmination of 6 months worth of different research and studies that we've been putting out here at Conviva that really is about understanding how consumers discover streaming content today across many different types of media. And today we're going to focus in particular on social media. Just a couple housekeeping tips before we jump in. We are recording today's session, so we will make it available to you and everybody else after the webinar. And feel free to submit any questions that you have throughout the session, and we will be able to stop and take breaks and have a question and answer session at the end today. So with that, I'd love to also introduce my co-presenter today, Mr. Michael Metzler. And Mike is the Senior Marketing Manager here at Conviva. And we have been working together for, as I mentioned, the past 6 months on really leaning into research around how do consumers discover content across all of these different platforms, right? So there have really been two key parts of our research. The first part was with Dynata. So we worked with the ARF and Dynata to actually survey 2,500 plus consumers on their streaming and media and social media usage and how they discover different types of content. And we surfaced a number of really key insights and have presented, pulled that together in a report, and we'll highlight some of those social aspects today. But I want to remind you that you can go back and check out our webinar on the state of streaming content discovery if you want to dig in to more of that data. And today we're going to lean into a couple of the key points that we found out of there. And the second part was first-party research from the Conviva Social Insights platform. And Conviva Social Insights works with some of the world's leading sports teams, media companies, and brands to help measure the performance of all of their own content across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, both their own accounts, but then also public leaderboards, right? So we're tracking hundreds of thousands of public accounts across 80 different industry categories, including television platforms, television networks, streaming shows, movies, as well as consumer brands and sports and influencers and more. So Mike from our team, he looked at all of the top performing content from a number of different of the top streaming TV shows and streaming publishers and pulled out the insights around all of the content that was performing really well and took a deep dive into what are marketers using on social media and how are they messaging to actually acquire and retain and engage those viewers. So we're going to get into a little bit of Mike's data in just a little bit, but we wanted to kind of highlight really the opportunity here. So Mike, if you can go to the next slide. As I mentioned before, today's consumers have more options than ever before to engage with content on a myriad of screens, right? With the ever increasing popularity of social media and streaming, as you can see here, the diversity of our consumption habits has really changed from users over the past few years. And now this complexity really makes the discovery of new streaming content a challenge for viewers, which is an even bigger challenge for content providers. So the reports that we've put out and the data that we're going to share today is really to help premium streaming publishers better create social content to engage those viewers, right? As we're going to talk about, and as you can see here, a lot of the time that's spent from media consumption is happening with streaming, and there's more places to actually stream that content than ever. I'm watching video when I'm looking at sites on my desktop or my laptop. I turn on my TV and now I can stream through my smart TV or through different apps. I go on social, and every social platform is video, which we're going to talk about. And we still have a significant amount of people watching linear TV, but also consuming other content, podcasts, obviously reading. There's lots of different things that you can do, but the digital era has really combined all of those. So when we take a look at the top sources of streaming discovery, what we really found is that content discovery is still a mystery, right? There are so many different platforms that are out there today. There are so many different options, right? Pretty much every major streaming publisher or broadcaster globally has rolled out some meaningful streaming solution into the market. And we're really 1 year into the next stage of maturity. So there's all of this content and all of these different devices and all of these different places, but how do I, as a viewer, actually go and discover content? Well, we found that 38% of viewers discover a new show by chance, but advertising is also really key, as well as our recommendations from friends and family. And finally, social engagement, which is what we're going to talk about today. So as you can see, discovering by chance or having recommendations surfaced while by watching your streaming service is something that you can use and change with your own programming and your own products. But being able to influence viewers' discovery by having strong advertising or being able to build a strong word of mouth machine to be able to have folks recommend your content and driving that through social is critical. So if we actually extrapolate those different sources of how people discover content and we kind of group them into different types of media, you can see that word of mouth, advertising, and social media are the three key drivers for people to discover new content. Now, what's really unique is that these are all interconnected. So word of mouth and advertising are so inextricably linked to social media than ever before, right? You have all of this content that is being advertised on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and now on TikTok. You have friends and people that are going on social networks to actually talk to people and share different videos and trailers that we're going to talk about a little bit more. So this concept of social media being a place where people are discovering content is really changing because the social media use is fluid throughout the advertising sources that you're consuming, the places where you're engaging and seeing word of mouth. Now, what are these folks doing on social media and why is it so important for streaming publishers to actually tap into video? Well, we found that these users on social media are actually consuming a significant amount of video content. So they're looking at posts from their friends, they're liking posts, they're commenting, but as you can see, there's also a significant amount of video activities. And this is really the fact that social is becoming more of a video first experience. So what we're seeing is kind of in the early days of social, pretty much YouTube dominated the video scene. I would upload videos to YouTube. You know, you had some early creators that were maintaining and building presences, and then really everything else on the rest of the platforms was more image-based and text-based. But over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen this huge growth from Facebook video, Twitter video, then the emergence of Snapchat and Vine, and then TikTok now today, which is 100% video. So when you have this world of streaming that's evolving, the world of social is evolving too, and video is becoming a key part of that, which is why it's probably no surprise that what we found in our study is that there's a direct synergy between high social media usage and engagement and high streaming content. So although there's been a lot of competition between streaming publishers and social media platforms for eyeballs, it's clear that the social media is highly valuable to the streaming industry, right? So these social platforms are the top information source among younger consumers age 18 to 34. 2/3 of our respondents agreed that social media has a lot of useful information about TVs, movies, and shows. And as you can see here, we have a direct correlation between high social media usage and high streaming video consumption. So high social media users are more than twice as likely to spend more than 8 hours a day streaming, while the inverse is true for low social media users, who are 3 times more likely to watch just 1 hour a day. And as I mentioned before, this is because video is becoming such an everyday part of behavior and consumption on content, where 4 or 5 years ago, video had not really permeated all of the different social networks the way that it has today. It was a much higher cost for actually uploading or producing video, or data plans that made it harder to download video, and innovations in technology to actually make file sizes smaller, right? So video is now able to be a daily part of the content that we share and consume, instead of this really precious object that can only live on a big screen, which means that more and more consumers are predisposed to actually consuming content if they're ingrained with social platforms. So as we're going to talk about before, your high social media users, or your heavy streamers, your heavy streamers are also the people that are actually consuming the most amount of content, right? They're the most active on social media. So what we found is that consumers that streamed a high amount of content, you can go to the next slide, Mike. Streamers that streamed a high amount of content interacted, excuse me, consumers that streamed a high amount of content were active on almost twice as many social media platforms as low or non-streamers, and also interacted more. They completed more activities like posting, sharing, liking, and viewing video. So combine this reality to the fact that social is one of the most important sources of content discovery and engagement, makes building out a comprehensive social marketing plan an absolute must for content providers. And the diversity is changing too. So probably for the first 10 years of modern social media, we had a very small number of platforms. We had Facebook, we had Twitter, we had YouTube, right? We had Instagram come onto the market, and Instagram filled the gap inside of there. We had Snapchat come on and took a huge share. And now we have new platforms like TikTok that are coming onto the scene, which is actually pretty new, right? We've had a long period of time where we had these big four, and TikTok has really come in. And as Mike's going to show, has really rocketed in terms of popularity, not just of users, but also in the effectiveness in growing and maintaining audiences for streaming publishers. So with that, I want to take a pause for a second and pass it over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the trends that we're seeing from marketers today on social platforms in the streaming media industry, who are taking a lot of these insights that we've just shared. They're applying them to their daily strategy and using them to better build relationships with those viewers so they can increase the amount of viewership and eyeballs on there. So Mike, why don't you take it away and talk a little bit more about the trends?
All right. Thanks so much, Nick. So whenever we did our own research a couple months ago, we broke down the top pieces of content from 8 leading streaming platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And then we also looked at the top shows ranked by engagements during that same time period and looked at the top content from those shows. And what we found was that there's a pretty big difference in between the top performing content on streaming TV platforms and the top content from streaming TV shows. Now, it's important to note that these breakdowns are not representative of the total share of content. It's just the top share. And so while there was a lot of content that overlapped, trailers and teasers, for example, they showed up at different frequency in the percentage of the top content. The easiest way to describe the streaming platforms, Netflix, Hulu, are that the top content represents utility as a discovery source, whereas fan pages are about driving and building engagement. We're going to go into some specific details around that. So this is the share of top content for streaming platforms and the share of top content for TV shows. For streaming platforms, trailers and teasers and announcements, which were usually, here's a new show coming in spring, or here's a new trailer, or here's a teaser for something that's coming up, it made up 73% of the top content for streaming TV platforms, compared to about 30% for show pages, which makes sense when you think about it. How many times can you watch the same trailer on a TV show Facebook page? So, what fills the gap for the streaming TV shows? So, and what we found was that it's content designed to engage the audience. The content for show pages can go a lot deeper than you can go on the platforms. If you're a fan of the show, you most likely know who the actors are, the story, you've been keeping up with the episodes, you've watched the last season, or you're getting ready. So that means you can do a lot more nuanced social content, like an awkward screen grab of 2 characters with, what are these guys thinking? And that content's going to hit and do really well on the show page, but people on the streaming platform, that's going to miss because they might not know the idiosyncrasies between those 2 guys on the show. They might not know who they are. So it represents a different type of content that's working. And the top performing content is really only things a person or a fan would understand. That is what really resonated to the top. We also saw that there's a lot of tune-in posts for top content for shows, and where that didn't make it into the streaming platforms at all. It's not to say that tune-in posts, which is, today a new episode's released, or like, did you catch the new episode? It's starting now. It's not to say that platforms didn't have those pages, but it did not break at all into top content, at least on Facebook. So, and for whatever reason, happy birthday posts for actors were a very popular segment for TV shows across basically all these different platforms. So to drive this further, we can look at Twitter, which had a very diverse selection of top content when comparing the social platforms, because there's really a lot you can do with Twitter. When you look at TV shows, you see engagement content, memes, happy birthday, cast videos, all things very specifically around the show, and people who are watching it made up more than half of the top content for shows, whereas it was a much smaller percentage for the platforms. We also saw that some Twitter ad formats made it into the top content. So, which was a really interesting surprise there. And this is just, you know, either here nor there. But if you've ever seen those, like here, to get reminded of those shows, for whatever reason, that content just kills on Twitter. Twitter has a real winner with that ad format. And so those are doing very well for TV shows. Those perform better than tweets about the band BTS, which, if you know you work in social, then you know anything that you post on Twitter about the band BTS just goes absolutely bonkers. And it's included in here because 3 different social TV platforms use that. But what we're really seeing here is that content for the TV shows is all about engagement, and you're seeing a lot more discovery here for the TV platforms. And we also see the content frequency is very different. Platforms are churning out content and at an unbelievable rate. On Facebook, they have 65 posts per month compared to 18 on a TV show. And despite the audience being 4 times larger on the platform pages, the average engagement by posts on TV shows is a higher engagement. On Twitter, it's more the same. 1,990 average posts per month by streaming platforms. That's a lot of replies, and not customer service. Lots of these platforms are actively replying everywhere and anywhere they can. But once again, you see a higher average engagement per post on the shows, despite having a much smaller average audience. And when it comes to videos on Twitter, those doing astronomical numbers.
And Mike, before you switch, we just had a question in the chat about paid or organic. So all of this data is pulled from the Conviva Social Insights leaderboards, which looks at public engagement and video viewership data across all of the various accounts that we're pulling from. In that sense, because it is public data, if posts are boosted, then the public data will be reflected on those in the different platforms today. So in this, we're looking at a combination where you can kind of consider it to be all of the public content, but that might be boosted, right? This does not account for any dark posting or social ads that may be run that weren't published to their page or targeted separately. So this is just looking at the organic content that lives on their page that's public. However, if it is boosted, that would be reflected in some of these totals.
And I think what was notable about that is that obviously a lot of these platforms are boosting content and promoting it, but not everything that you post is successful and generates tons of engagements. And that's really what we're analyzing here. We're not analyzing impressions. We're not analyzing, views that play automatically. These are engagements. So if they did post it, it's content that got engagement. So that's why it was notable to point out that one on Twitter, just, as a random point, that one's very obviously a promoted ad type that did make its way into the top engaging posts.
Yes.
So back to top content, or back to content frequency. So once again, we're seeing only 89 versus over 1,000, but much higher engagements per post compared to a much lower audience. So, and on Instagram, it's much more the same thing. Much lower average posts per month, lower audience for TV shows, but a much higher engagements per post despite having a smaller audience. So to bring this back, the content that performs best on platforms is content that's focused on new shows, content discovery, and content for TV shows is much more about engaging and building a community. The strength of the community is the thing that you've seen time and time again is the sole reason that shows get extended, picked up, renewed, Arrested Development's coming back, or this, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is going to another, streaming platform, the show Community, so if you can build a strong community around your show, you're setting yourself up for success. It's really all about community. And the data shows. Were you gonna say something?
I was just saying that's a pretty good transition point, I think, to the next point, right? If you think about kind of social marketing and streaming TV has really followed the same tried and true pattern for X number of years, I would say up until about a year ago per se, where you've really focused on having a page for your network or a page for your platform, right? And with streaming services now, you have a page for your streaming service. And then your main hits are going to have most of their own show pages, right? If they're big enough, right? Or if you're not making individual show pages, you know, publish content on your main page, and you might use hashtags to denotate the different types of posts, right? And I think as you were going to say, the data shows that you have to have at least one of those. You have to at least be marketing your show, or at a minimum, if you're a network or a service, you have to be you know, marketing your service. But that also leaves some limitations, right? If as you mentioned before, if what if that show is really popular but doesn't necessarily have the long-standing power? What if it doesn't go for 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons, right? What if it's just a really awesome limited series, right? That might not have a future inside of there. What's really difficult, I think, from what we've seen with our customers as well, right, is you have a lot of effort that might be put into building up the audience on your main accounts, your main show page, your main streaming platform page, and maybe a couple of these really big shows that are you know, kind of staples, right? But how do you transfer those audiences? Right, you can't overly promote a certain type of category or a type of genre or a type of content on your main show page, right? Because you still have to show tune-in messages. You're still, you know, running, you know, marketing promotions to actually acquire those viewers, right? Get them to sign up for free trials if that's what you're doing. So you have more messages that you kind of need to cover in that main account. And that's, I think, one of the unique things that we've started to see now is that expanding from the single show page and from the platform page are these community-based accounts, right? So as we move into, you know, the second point here is really that you know, social TV today is really about building community, where you can segment your audience based on the content that they are most interested in, right? So I think what we're starting to see here is the same success that the data is showing us that people have when they are really engaged with one particular show can be harnessed to actually build interest-based community groups. So I think you know, we can look at a couple of examples here, Mike. But Netflix, I think, has done an amazing job of this, where now they're not just promoting content on a single show page or on their own page, but they're building out all of these interest-based communities in social. Netflix is a joke, Strong Black Lead, Netflix Geeked. Even, you know, some of the other platforms are starting to take on this as well, with Amazon, you know, kind of building out more of a horror film vertical, right? You have these groups where you can actually market to different people and market many different types of shows that are all around a similar type of interest, that allow people to build a community and actually have that discussion over and over again, right? I can use my Strong Black Lead community to promote not only the shows and movies that might feature, you know, Black actors and directors and actresses, but I can also tell their story. I can get people more involved in that, where I might not be able to go down the rabbit hole of a particular genre on my main page, right? Or Netflix, that's invested a significant amount in comedy and stand-up comedy, right? They also have, you know, a serious channel that's dedicated to taking clips of their stand-up comedy and putting it on there, right? So there's this whole affinity that people who are fans of comedy have with Netflix, because they have an exclusive line of content, right? A whole content vein about that. So if you were to try to have these messages on your one main Netflix channel, right? You know, you can only create so much content in a single day, right? No matter how big you are, right? Even if you're ESPNs and CNNs that post hundreds of pieces of content, you know, there are still only so many different types of content that you can produce for people to actually align themselves and still be interested with a theme as your brand message, right?
Yeah,
so I think that,
go ahead. I mean, these accounts are all about adopting, you know, the perspective of the target audience and, like, in the most authentic way possible. You know, by creating these audience-centric accounts, it allows you to go to these possibly typically underserved audience segments and keep them highly engaged year-round, as opposed to just when you know, a new show is up. You know, and as diversity becomes a central focus in the world of entertainment, that same sort of approach trickles down to social media strategy to promote these shows. You know, you have a strong reaction if you feel seen or understood, and that holds true with social media and the viewing habits of, you know, diverse consumers. So it's really an enlightened approach to marketing these different TV shows. Sorry, I just wanted to interject that.
No, I think I totally agree, and I think what's cool is if you want to go to the next slide, feel free. I think what you broke down how all of these accounts are interconnected, which I thought was really interesting. So why don't you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, you can tell that it's all connected and they're all in. If you take a look at how Netflix is building these specific communities, it starts at the very top with their Netflix here, right in the front first thing, the second word in their bio, they have their next community, Netflix Golden, a channel to dedicating celebrating all stories from the Asian diaspora. And so it's not a show, although Ozark is there in the title. But if you go and you click on that, then you go and you see that Strong Black Lead is at the pinned top. And if you go and you click around these dozens of different community-based accounts Netflix has, they are all promoting and tying back into each other, because you do see overlap in a lot of these accounts. But this shows that there's a very strong focus and deliberate intention of this being how they want to promote their shows, because we saw the data shows what we just showed, that engagements on specific shows gets higher than the platform. So you go, how can you translate that? It's by building these communities. These communities, I was taking a look at the average engagement rate on Twitter versus these community shows, and it's about 8 times higher, for these specific community shows. Now, Netflix has 15.7 million followers, so you can't expect, but if you go, and look at on average of all these, that's still a significantly higher average engagement rate. And so it's working, and they see that, and you can expect that that's going to be adopted by nearly everybody, and it's already being there. And one important thing that we wanted to call out is that this is different than regional accounts. We've seen that was 2 or 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, that everybody started building out these regional accounts, and those make sense because you need to have content. Because how you promote in one region is undeniably different to another, and not just in the form of languages, which is important, but there's different cultural barriers and things like that how you promote a show in one way. So, but still, you're seeing that I think this tweet was from HBO Max yesterday. They're launching 15 additional European countries as part of their global rollout. On TikTok, you see that there's dozens of accounts for all these. On Instagram, you see there's dozens of accounts for all these. These are really, one level. And you can imagine that once they build out and they see that they have a successful country, then they're going to start rolling out these community things. It's, it's a tiered approach. Do you have anything else you wanted to add there, Nick?
No, I just think to sum up this point, I would encourage anybody who is doing marketing for a streaming service or a streaming show to see what are interest-based communities that you can participate in. If you're marketing the show, what is the platform or the network that your show is distributed on? How could you collaborate with them? I think that's another interesting thing to think about, is that Netflix often is able to do a lot of this because they're buying originals, but we know that if you are a channel on Pluto or a channel on Fubo TV or one of these fast channels, there's a lot of power in co-marketing, and you don't always have to wait for the platform to come up with these ideas, where maybe you can work with them and collaborate and promote them too. So if whatever side you're on, if you're marketing from a show perspective, if you're marketing from the platform side, think about how can I bring an interest-based community strategy into my my marketing, and maybe even starting small and thinking about what is the most engaged genre, right? This is where Conviva Viewer Insights is also really helpful, right? You can take a look at all of that owned video data on all of your streaming platforms and be able to understand what genres or what shows are being consumed by the most people, and actually look at those clusters of people and see how that matches up with the content that people are engaging with in social, to see, hey, maybe there's a fit here for me to dig deeper into a nerd or a geek genre if I want to, or maybe I should double click into a horror vertical and build that out, or a superhero focused angle, right? I think that the one thing to think about here is like, even this account right here, this Inside HBO Max account, think about it from the lens of a real creator or an influencer, or media publisher, right? Think about the the film channels or the TV trailer review channels that you might go and watch on YouTube, right? Think about all of these other areas and the way that different types of genres all have their niche communities, right? And how can you tap into each one of those communities and make more effective use of your social?
Thanks. And so now we're, getting into, so we've talked about content themes, we've talked about community. Now let's talk a little bit about the platforms and how those different platforms are supporting different trends and purposes. And I want to reemphasize where we started. If you remember from the state of content discovery at the very beginning, what Nick was talking about is one of the most common things people are doing is creating and watching videos with their friends. And that's really a juxtaposition of short and long form content. But if you look at what is really getting the engagement from these different platforms, it's a little bit different. So here we have a breakdown of all the different platforms and their audience and percentage of the audience share. And whenever I put this together, I was a little bit surprised because TikTok, which is, within a year or two of them actually, doing this, is third in total audience share for these top streaming platforms for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney, Hulu, Peacock, HBO Max. Those are the ones that we're looking at. Their third biggest audience is the newcomer, TikTok. And you can probably guess that is growing at the fastest rate. And Facebook, and this is basically true for all industries out there, has the highest percentage total share. And there's a lot of reasons that's true. But it's about longevity, it's about the audience and platform size, it's about where how they've been able to roll it out to, they have a big head start. They're in every single country. And also notable is YouTube is in the double digits at 12%. You don't normally see YouTube in double digits for the share of audience, but it makes sense for streaming and video platforms. But what's really interesting and telling is Instagram, which is promoting Reels more than ever, TikTok, which is only video, YouTube, which is only video, are really seeing some good growth. And Facebook's total audience size isn't quite, the gotcha that it once was. If you take a look at the share of audience for these platforms and compare it to the share of total engagements, there's a pretty big disparity. While Facebook commands 64% of the total audience, it's only 13% of total engagements. Meanwhile, that 15% share of Instagram is 74% of their total engagements. TikTok wasn't included here because we weren't able to get that specific data as it related to all this. But you can probably guess it's nestled somewhere in between Facebook and Instagram. Now let's take a look at shows. Facebook, 68% of the audience, 13% of the share of engagements. Meanwhile, Instagram, 17%, and 77% of the share of total. So what does this tell us? TikTok growing like crazy, Instagram dominating the measurable engagements. It's kind of, we're living in the TikTok, IG Reels vertical video world. And that's because short form vertical video is becoming a key form in daily engagement in the format that TikTok has defined. Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's less investment than long form video. And it's, a really easy way to be digested and shared. But if you got to really look at the user behavior and changing trends, if you look at the way we used to scroll through social media, it used to be on the desktop, and then it came mobile and you were scrolling through text posts, pictures and videos. And if you look at the habit of how people are consuming content daily now, they're scrolling through TikTok-esque videos on TikTok. They're doing it on Instagram now. They're doing it on Facebook now. They're doing it on YouTube now. Video has really become the daily social engager, more so than a lot of these other, formats that, have built up to this. And as these platforms are adapting and changing as fast as they can to support this, Reels is all over Instagram. They had, Meta, Facebook, they had their big, earnings conference just recently, and they said Reels more than any other word. And they're bringing that as fast as they can to Facebook. And you know it if you just go look anywhere. YouTube, they now have YouTube Shorts. Snapchat has Snapchat Spotlight. And when you look at the actual numbers from TikTok and what these platforms are doing on there, it's astounding. Netflix gained an average of 1 million new followers a month last year on TikTok. And since this report has came out, this content, the social guide for streaming, which is where all this information is from, and it's a report that we have available. Since this came out in October, Amazon Prime has gained 2 million followers in the last 3 months. So they're over 10 million. And you know from some of those other things that they have dozens of accounts on TikTok for all the different regions. And these gains don't happen with significant investments being made. So when we look at what, daily engaging content looks like, we're living in a vertical video world now. Vertical video has hit its maturity because you can now post a vertical video like this, and it's going to be consumed in a very similar way on nearly every single social platform. And so what does that mean for the future? So whenever we were looking at, at these different shows and these different platforms, one thing that I thought was really interesting was that not every single show had a, organic TikTok page, whereas every single show had a Instagram account. Every single one of these shows had a Twitter account. Every single one of these shows had a Facebook account. But only about 3 of these had, organic TikTok accounts. So, one of the reasons might be the community-based approach. But if you take a look at these hashtags from these popular shows, these shows are on TikTok. They have a presence there. Riverdale, which does not have an organic, Facebook or organic TikTok account, had 19.4 billion views on the hashtag Riverdale. Saying, 14.3 billion for Loki, 12.1 for Shadow and Bone. And the way that this is happening is because people are sharing these hashtags in the same way, for the same purpose that Netflix is going out and creating all these communities. These hashtags represent a shared interest. So if you put hashtag Riverdale on your TikTok, you're hoping that people who are fans of Riverdale are going to see your content because, it's a similar thing to you like. So, these shows, even if they're not on there, have a presence on there. So we can guess that, every show that has its own IG page is probably going to have its own TikTok page in the future. That's just going to go hand in hand, especially when you look at the types of content, because IG is all about reels. Why would you not also have a TikTok account? So as short form vertical video is how brands engage with their audiences daily. And if they aren't already doing this now, they will be soon. And we're starting to see some even bigger shifts from platforms that aren't TikTok and that aren't Instagram. So this is from our most recent state of streaming. And so we looked at the share of content, video content on YouTube and Facebook that was from 0 to 60 seconds and 61 to 6, or a minute plus. And what we saw is that YouTube, the platform mostly known for long form content, their share of 0 to 1 minute long content increased by 2% in the past year as they rolled out shorts. And while that's 2%, that's a pretty big massive shift in the number of data whenever it comes to like YouTube. And it's you could say 90 to 88%, but it's really represents what these platforms need. You need to have this daily video for content engagements, but that doesn't mean that long form content isn't very, very important. Long form content and long form social is key for maximizing content discovery, as we saw in a lot of those content breakdowns earlier. Trailers are very important. It combines the synergy of social ads and word of mouth. People are still watching content on YouTube as a replacement for daily TV. Long form content is more important than ever. It's silly to say that daily short forms, but long form content, they're both increasingly important as part of your social strategy. People are spending more times on these social platforms than they are in looking through shows. They're scrolling through YouTube channels and watching trailers and then going straight into their streaming platform and watching that. And we're in and you're wanting to be able to create this long form content that helps up speed discovery in the place where people spend their time. So platforms like YouTube and Facebook are still extremely valuable at sampling and previewing content, interacting with influencers, and discussing new opportunities for creating better word of mouth. So short form content is your snackable every day that leads to more in-depth long form content. The two are really feeding into each other, but it's ultimately a lot of times that long form content that converts the viewer into a viewer of the show. You need to have both.
Yeah, I would say before you just go on, that's really important to think about, right? Because as we see more of the short form video every single day, we can be inundated with the messaging like, you got to try Reels, got to try Shorts, got to try TikTok, right? And as we talked about before, the short form video is now every day, right? Everyday engagement where I'm making content, I'm making stories, I'm making images and photos, and I'm publishing that a lot more frequently. But as Mike mentioned, we really have to look at the value, right? There are streaming TV companies and television companies that are uploading full-length shows to YouTube, right? And having people test new content and be able to experience or premiere new shows and be able to get feedback from comments that are inside of there, or host a live watch party. You have this long form content that is so powerful to be able to get people to get involved. And as we talked about before, that synergy of being able to have somebody who's streaming content for as many numbers of hours as they are in the day, these are going to be probably the same people that are actually going and digging into their favorite YouTube channels. They're probably following a ton of other reviewers or other types of content that they're getting their information from. And so it's really important to be able to have longer form video that exists on social so that you can share it. I can share it with my friends when I get excited about a trailer, that you have materials for influencers and creators to actually build and remix off of to spark more engagement with the community. So it's really important to have both long and short form content, especially the way that the social world has become so much more shareable and remixable today. So it's super important to have content types of all shapes and formats to be able to give people that in-depth look so they can sample things, so they can really dig in and have an immersive experience with your video content, because that is the item that you're selling is premium video. But then at the same time have all of these fun, irreverent types of short clips that are gonna kind of hold your attention as you're scrolling through in your day-to-day, as Mike said.
So just to review key insights from today, social media and streaming viewership are more closely intertwined than ever before in the content discovery process. Community building is the key to high engagement, especially around particular shows or audience segments. TikTok is overtaking a lot of the social platforms. They're growing faster. And short form content is now the key type of daily engagement. But long form content is key to providing more immersive experiences, discovering new content, and sparking conversations for things to come. So if you have any questions, please let us know in the chat. I can't view the chat, Nick, because I have all this PowerPoint up, but if there's any questions, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, this presentation will be available to replay later, and we're going to send it out to everybody.
No questions at the moment.
Okay, well, we can wrap up then.
Let's see. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to Mike and I either on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or we will be emailing you guys a copy of this webinar as well. So feel free to reach back out to us. And thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, if you're interested in the Conviva Social Insights platform to measure content on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, feel free to reach out to us if we're not already working together. So thank you very much and have a great day.